We're going to go ahead and get started here at the fabricator stage. The next session is on the chemistry of adhesives. We have Paul Cleese with Bondstone with us. Paul's been in the industry a lot of years. Great source of knowledge, great presentation. Quick shout out to our sponsors. Visit the Rockhead booth here on my left. A great association of fabricators that get together and discuss best practices, procedures, processes. Great wealth of information, as well as ISFA. ISFAnow.org is their website. Again, another association that's a great tool for fabricators. Natural Stone Institute, visit their booth as well. All great sources. And with that, the Chemistry of Adhesives by Paul.
Thank you. Since maybe we'll change up a little more intimate here, a little less people, but we can ask a lot of questions and go through it a little differently maybe. But I'm just going to talk about some of the stuff I've seen over the last 30 years and some of the different adhesives out on the market. It's always changing. It's drastically changed over the last 10 years. But I guess I get started here. Just some learning objectives of it. The chemistries, understanding adhesives and patching systems, just the different variety of adhesives out on the market, the pros and cons, properties, packaging. Really helps you to understand the packaging if you're buying it from a manufacturer or a distributor, actually knowing what product and what kind of product it is. Applications, just some short failures in testing, interior and exterior, using the wrong products, the UV concerns that there are with a lot of products, and staining. Now this is a really condensed chemistry presentation here, just for a half hour, but usually these can last up to an hour. It's a pretty big market out there with adhesives. So I just want to get a general idea of the different systems out there. The chemistries out on the market. You have epoxies, which been out in the market for, we've been in business 60 years, and it's way before that when they started making epoxies for the different markets. It's a two-part system. It's an amine cure. Mechanism, it means it's a reaction. Two A and B mixtures are reacting with each other, so you get really strong bonds. And polyesters are a two-part benzyl peroxide, so you're really pretty much just setting off the part A. If you were to just let your polyester sit out in your shop without a lid on it, it's going to eventually cure up, and you'll see it in the buckets. And same thing with vinyl esters. It's a two-part MEK peroxide with another addition mechanism. Acrylics, there's some experts here I know in the crowd here that work with acrylics as well, but it's a MEK peroxide cure. It's same thing, or a UV cure, and some of the CA glues, cyanoacrylates. The other one I'm going to be talking about is urethanes, polyaspartics, and some derivatives. There's a lot of hybrids out on the market. If it is a urethane base, you're going to get better UV with it with a lot of manufacturers as far as when working with lighter colored stones. So big concern if you're using white stones or exterior for barbecue areas. And the patching systems, that's going to gloss over because it's not really going to be talking about that right now, or silicones. Epoxies, packaging, generally in our market it's a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 system. They do make 4-to-1s. Some of the slab consolidation products are 4-to-1 mixtures, but generally what you're going to see in a lot of the suppliers and the manufacturers are 1-to-1 and 2-to-1 systems. The pros, adhesive strength with epoxies. By far you're getting some of the strongest properties when you're using epoxy. Very low shrinkage, not even detected in a lot of areas, but that's a big concern. I'll go through it some more in the slides. Outdoor durability. Durability means strength. It's going to hold up exterior. UV is a different story. VOCs, zero VOCs with most of the epoxies on the system. Once in the past and in the boat market, a lot of their epoxies, they put a solvent in it to thin it out, and that's considered there goes your VOCs. But most of ours are concentrates in the market here. Moisture tolerant. High moisture environments it's great for. Temperature resistant for exterior grade. We do a lot of exterior grade systems, so they hold up exterior. chemical resistant, and shelf life. We still have stuff that's over 20 years old. We still get the same properties out of it. It's just the systems are going to amber over time. Some of the Part B is going to get to an amber state. So the cons, UV stability. There's not a lot of epoxy systems out there that, actually I don't even know any in this market. Aerospace, you're going to get some UV stable systems, but they're going to discolor any kind of ultraviolet. They chalk up. They don't break it down, but they chalk up the surface. It's a surface phenomenon. And critical mix ratios, you want to stick with the 2-to-1, the 1-to-1 ratio. A lot of guys think if you're using like a peroxide, add a little bit more, it's going to kick off. Generally with these, you're just ruining the properties. It's going to either get soft or brittle if you're mixing different mix ratios. So best thing to do is if you want it to set off quicker, apply heat to it. Epoxies work great. I mean, in different markets, guys are sticking it out in the sun to snap it off, or they're running a heater on it, blowtorch, just to hit, along the area just outside the joint to snap it and kick it off. Critical mixing. Sensitive to cure temperatures. Obviously, most epoxy systems, except mercaptans, are not going to cure below 45 degrees. They go into a stall state where it's just going to sit there. That's why if you set something up, do a lamination, and it sits out, your shop's cold, or if it's sitting outside, it's not going to fully cure until it gets above 45. It's curing process. It just sits in a stall state. And here, polyesters are probably been around for ages, and this is probably the most popular for over the years. It's just I don't recommend polyesters for exterior just because of the shrinkage issue, and they just don't hold up exterior. Usually with these, it's a peroxide cure. As you can see, if you're not used to using them and you don't know a lot of materials, this is a big giveaway. If it's a peroxide cure, it's a little white tube, cream hardener, and it's usually like a 50-to-1 ratio to set it off. Sometimes when you start adding more of the hardener, it heats it up and you're going to get some cracking to it. You'll see it in a mass when you're mixing them. The pros, fast cure, easy to use, less sensitive to cure temperatures, relatively really low cost on polyesters, familiarity to the market. A lot of these people are using these over the years. To be honest with you, people call and they still ask for an epoxy and they're using a polyester. You got to understand the differences, because if once you understand it, then you can know the applications they're using on. A lot of people just don't know what applications to use them on. Low adhesion strength, the odor, you can usually tell with the odor of it. The shrinkage, flammability, poor water tolerance, and high VOCs. Poor exterior durability. And they're not UV stable. And the short shelf life. Generally, a lot of the systems you'll see out here is epoxies, obviously have a longer shelf life, but most of the other ones, probably anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half shelf life to it. And I know there's somebody here in Arizona, and you have that sitting out in your truck. You probably got about 2 weeks with it. It's gonna, it's pretty much done. It's already curing up inside the tube or in the can. These are the different containers used in the market. This is a polyepoxy, which was popular probably about 10 years ago to 15 years ago. The biggest one on the market right now is the vinyl esters. These are really popular, and the properties to them have really increased over the last 3 to 4 years, and the clarity of them, and they're really nice to use. There's some issues with them for exterior. I would recommend testing it, throwing it outside, seeing if it's UV stable, adding some color into it, see if it changes colors to you, because there's a lot out there with different properties. But generally, it's still a 2% peroxide cure, so it's like a 50-to-1 ratio. But this just shows you with vinyl esters sometimes, 50-to-1, 10-to-1, with a lot of the different packaging here, and 50-to-1 with the quarts and gallons packaging. And I hope to get some more comments, because I know there's some people here that are are used to using vinyl esters as well. But polyepoxies and vinyl esters, the pros: fast cure, easy to use, less sensitive to temperatures, flammability, familiarity, better adhesion than polyesters and the polyepoxies. The expense, the odor, there's still a lot of odor with them. Shrinkage, high VOC, and poor water tolerance, flammability. So you have to read the cans and see. Some of the manufacturers are, creating packaging, and some of the newer products are out there that, are dealing with a lot of these cons right now. From poly?
So how do you tell the difference between from poly and vinyl ester?
We got a vinyl ester manufacturer, so.
Vinyl esters are cooked a little differently than a polyester. Polyester is a batch type process. It's pretty short. They take styrene, they react it together to form polystyrene in there, and you have a viscosity, that type of thing. Vinyl ester, generally, they're adding other components other than styrene. Some will have an MMA involved in it. They're cooked longer. They're a different structure, and they bond much better, much stronger. Vinyl ester is one of the strongest polymers that are out there in terms of adhesives. But there are 4 manufacturers in the country. There's Ashland is one. Interplastic is another. IP resins. VMAX.
Oh, our names.
VMAX.
Yeah.
VMAX would be one. Titanium would be another. We have a product called Seam King Select is another one. I think Akimi's got one, and Inachem's got one, a K-bond type thing.
Thanks. As you can see, I come from the epoxy and urethane background, so that really helps out. We get some expertise with vinyl esters here. Oh boy. So, yeah, I agree a lot. That have come a long ways over the last couple of years with vinyl esters as far as strength and stuff. I'm not still a big believer on exterior with them, but who knows down the road? I'm not sure. Acrylics and methacrylates, MMAs. Acrylics in this market that I've seen work really nice as far as the penetrating acrylics for doing fissure and slab consolidations. Fills in all the cracks. I haven't really been used too many of the acrylics for doing a lot of laminations over the years. I know there's only not a lot of people are making just straight acrylics anymore. But the MMAs are really popular right now. As you can see, a lot of the suppliers are making 50 to 100 different colors of in the tubes. It's a 10-to-1 ratio, and those are working really nice. But this is pretty much what you're going to see in a lot of the. If you want vendor names, there's a lot out there. You familiar with these? Okay, yeah. But this is the packaging for them. Sometimes they have them in a single tube that go in a cartridge system, dispensed 10-to-1, or they'll have a side-by-side, usually just a two-cylinder, and you have to use a special gun for it. The pros, the fast cure, better strength than vinyl esters. Could be, as I said, they're starting to meet a little bit more in the middle on those products. Better strength, easy to use, less sensitive to cure temperatures, familiarity, good clarity. The clarity of these products has really gotten better over the years. So the best way to do it is add the peroxide and see what kind of cure you're getting. If it starts changing colors, then you're working against that clarity that you started with. So. Moderate adhesion strength, odor, shrinkage, expense, flammability, high VOCs, short shelf life. Then again, you know, in different climates, it's going to change drastically. Polyurethanes and polyaspartics. The polyurethane is the base material, and a lot of the hybrids are made into polyaspartics, but the base material is polyurethanes. You see that a lot in floor coatings where there's a lot of polyaspartic floor coatings, but in our market, this is the different packaging that you'll see. Either a 1-to-1 mix ratio in containers. We actually put ours in a tube for Part B, just for shelf life, because it's a sensitive material. It's a urethane, so it's moisture-cure urethane. So you're going to pull moisture in if you have a lot of moisture in your stone or in the air. You want to avoid that as much as possible. That's why we put it in the containers. We put it in tubes, unless customers are going through quite a bit of it. Then they can use the containers. It's 1-to-1 mix, and then there is a tube that's carried for a 1-to-1 mix. It's a single tube, Part A and Part B. I'll show some pictures of the packaging a little later. It's also done in 2-to-1 packaging and 2-to-1 packaging in a single tube as well. That's really popular for the construction market when they're going to a job site, so they don't have to have a special gun. Just take it up to the scaffolding or wherever they're working, and the guys can use their standard caulk guns with it. So this product is very popular right now because of the non-yellowing and shrinkage to the product. And you're working with anything with light color material, translucent material, you run into a lot of issues with UV. And unless you're pulling some contaminant into the product, I haven't seen too many discolorations with it. But it really depends on how it's being used. You got to make sure it's stored correctly and mixed correctly. Pros: fast cure, adhesion strength. As an example, we have one of our systems as far as testing, and we had one of our testing labs use our product and what was it? It was almost an inch and a half threaded rod into, or actually 2-inch threaded rod into marble block that was 4 foot by 6 foot, and it was run through a floor system, and they pulled it through, and the whole block broke. So urethanes are coming a long way as far as strength, as close to adhesives, close to epoxies. It's UV stable, as I said, less sensitive to cure temperatures. We have you can use it down into colder temperatures below freezing, but then you're worried about condensation on the stone or in the joint. So those got to be totally dry. Low odor, virtually no odor to the product. There's no VOCs. Cons are its critical mix ratio again. You don't want to deviate from the mix ratio. Expensive. Critical mixing. Shelf life. Generally, it's not quite as sensitive as some of the polyesters on the market. We usually get about a year and a half out of a cartridge system shelf life. If you have it at a can and you're opening, closing it, you're introducing moisture to it. If you're not moving through that product very well, you want to store that in a cooler area. And then the CA glues. That was another, I'm not going to really get into that, but those are getting pretty popular right now. These are some of the charts that we help out a lot of the customers with in choosing products. These are available on our website if you need to, and these can be changing quite a bit with the different products on the market. I'm just going to scroll through these a little bit. So yeah, I got under shelf life 6 to 12 months usually with a lot of these. It really depends on your storage of the material. I mean, Adam, in Arizona, do you see a typical shelf life of some of the products out there?
So at my store, we'd change out cans weekly from the trucks.
Mm-hmm.
If it was in the truck, it couldn't stay on the truck for more than a week.
Yep. And the way to test that out is you get skimming. You get a lot of skimming to the top of the product. Patching compounds, I'm just going to go. This is the packaging I wanted to show you different packaging. When you get to 1-to-1 epoxies, urethanes and polyaspartics are generally in a tube system, side by side, and then you have a 2-to-1 epoxy, urethane or polyaspartic. It could be in a side by side as well. I mean, everybody's got their own packaging with their cartridge. I mean, their cartridge guns. So it really depends on the packaging from the different suppliers. This is a very interesting the way this works, though, because a lot of people get confused on the single tube. So you got a part A and a part B in the chamber. It gets pushed to the middle. So when it stops in the middle, it's done. A lot of guys are, if they're using a pneumatic gun, they're popping through the nozzle because the pressure of it, but they have to stop right when it gets to the middle because it's done. It works from both sides to the middle. But this is the chamber for it. And then this one is a lot of MMAs are packaged in this way. I didn't blur out the name there a little too much, though. But and then 10-to-1s are also packaged this way. Viscosities, you can run anything from a knife grade, a gel consistency, like Vaseline consistency, I should say. And those are work great for verticals, for doing miters. If you're doing a seam in a shower, if you're adjoining two slabs, you want something knife grade. You're not going to want something running, obviously. So, but you can change the viscosity around. We have, with our urethane example, is you can use our knife grade A with our flowing B and get like a snotty look to it. Sorry, but it gives you a nice tighter bond, and it still hangs in your joint. But there's also 1-to-1. There's flowing systems as well. On the left shows a flowing product, and these come in different colors with different resins. It can be amber already when it comes to you, but you really want to do a low, and I think I show in this one. When you look into a lot of cans with the epoxy systems, you're going to see a yellow tinge to it. It's just because of the resin chemical in it, and trying to go through a can, you're getting a reflection, and it's turning amber. But the one on the right here, this is the packaging in some of the containers, but when you put it in a small little jar, it's crystal clear. So I always tell people, do a drawdown of it first, and you'll see the true color of it. Don't look into the can. What's a drawdown? Is just take the mix and then draw it down on a piece of paper so it's like a thin 16th inch, 1/8 inch, and you get the true color what you're looking for. I mean, a lot of people are buying it for the color if it's an epoxy out of the can, totally clear. There were some manufacturers that are tinting it and dyeing the color to like a purple, so they get a little bit of mixture out of it. You know who I'm talking about with that. So when I talk about the shrinkage, this is the big factor is epoxies and urethanes have more Velcro effect, more little intangibles because it's a reaction. When you get to polyesters and some of the polyepoxies and some of the vinyl esters, you have less of those because you're setting it off. So that's where the strength issue comes into play. This is what you get typically with a lot of polyesters and vinyl esters, the shrinkage. And the big concern for this exterior, there's some concerns interior, but exterior is because if you get any pull away, if you're doing a bond and it goes into the pores and pulls away, it's creating a little gap in there. Any moisture getting in there is going to cause freeze thaw, and that's where you get pop-offs. So the less shrinkage, the better on any kind of adhesive exterior. And that's why epoxies are generally used exterior in this market. This just shows a close-up. Because I'm talking, we do a lot of exterior stuff as well. So some people put epoxies in, they'll bond the stone. This is all fine for strength-wise, but then through UV, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get that yellow line going through it. Generally, what they'll do here, it's all fine for structural, is they'll take a Dremel or a tight diamond tool, cut that back, and they'll throw a urethane in there for UV, so that it's not going to discolor on them. This just shows in place replacing a joint that yellowed up and taking the material and put it right back into the miter. And I see a lot of this is marbles being used exterior. light-colored stones, especially on the shore like this. There's a lot of abrasion from the sands and the salt air coming in and abrading the surface, which is making it more susceptible to discoloration in that joint area and around it. So you really, when you get into situations like this, you want to use a UV stable system. Else you're going to be replacing that joint, and it's going to fail, and you're going to get a lot of moisture, and it's going to virtually be popping off. This just shows a Dutchman. I don't know if you guys know what Dutchmans are, but exterior, when they have doing some restoration, when they cut out a piece of stone that's failed, and they put a brand new piece of stone in, it's called a Dutchman, and they'll replace it and put it right back into place, and they'll glue it in, and then that last joint, they want a UV product, or what they'll do is they'll just they'll load up some stone dust and throw it onto the urethane or the epoxy, and you virtually, if this is up more than a story, you won't even see it. And this just shows they did a joint with an epoxy, and then they used a lime-based mortar for the last 1/8 inch, and it's virtually, it disappears your joint. And for marble patching, which is, being pretty big on the East Coast as far as a lot of the historical buildings, this just shows what you can do is with urethane, you blend in, you can do blending and patch in areas, and it's UV stable, and you're not going to have any failures with it. But so this is really popular on the East Coast. When you're going to run into different environments, like this was a Decton job in Denver where the temperatures are the most drastic in the country, temperature changes, so for freeze thaw. You need to have a structural material that's got a little bit of give to it into the joint area to hold up. This is just a really intricate design edge there. I think it was a little overkill, but as you can see how many bonded areas are in there. And then they're using the wrong product. Sometimes you don't want to use a real brittle product for exterior when you get into the barbecue areas, because that could be pinching against the movement of the subframe, and you could actually go to those edges and hit it with your elbow, and it's going to be popping off if it's pretty brittle for exterior. UV, a lot of people are using for onyx and for quartzites for exterior. You run into a lot of UV issues. That's why you want to use a UV stable system here. This is just what happens with an epoxy. What's going to happen is all that light reflection through the stone is going to totally yellow up your product. And this is what happens. And generally in something like this, you can't even take a Dremel head and get back far enough to hide it. So, you have to live with it or replace it. But in a situation like this is where if it was just a solid or white material, you'd put a straight edge up there and put a Dremel, a little diamond Dremel head, run it across there, cut it back about 1/8 inch, and then put in your UV system so you won't have that issue. This is just some more brittle material with some of the sintered products. Porcelain, I should say. That was a porcelain product. Staining issues are huge in the market, and I just listened to a quartzite explanation of what's happening with all the moisture trapped in there. We get these calls all the time, but what happens is that I've seen either the joint they're using for urethanes. You don't want to use acetone to clean up the surface and flood it. You want to use denatured alcohol. Acetone's going to, if you're flooding the surface, is going to break it down, push it into the pores. It's going to go around the crystals, and it's going to just wet out that area. It's tough to get out. You have to poultice it then. Or it's a contaminated rag. You don't want to use an old rag when you're doing cleanup on the surface. And the other thing is moisture trapped in there. A lot of the stones are holding moisture, and it's trying to get out right where the seam is, because that's a solid seam. It's not a breathable seam. So it just sits there right at the edge. And that's where you want to do a poultice if you have to remove it, or a dryer of some sort to remove it. It may take some longer time, but that's the main things I'm seeing with that, because there's not a lot of the systems out there are non-bleeding systems that they say, But when you get into a situation where you're using some people are using MEK to clean up, that's going to totally break down your properties of the product, and it's going to wet it out. You're going to get a soft joint, and that's not very good when you're working with these applications. Here's just another explanation of one. And that's pretty much it, because it's a short little explanation. If you guys have any questions at all? Yeah.
I've always wondered, what is like actual tensile strength from the top to the bottom of your different glues? Has anybody ever published that?
We do, but generally we're getting about, we do shear blocks, meaning we cut blocks that are 2 inch by 2 inch, 4 inch by 4 inch, and we'll do a shear bond where you try pushing down and you get a shear strength to it. And we soak them as well, but we're generally getting anywhere from 4 to 6,000 psi, and the stone's breaking. What happens is you get really good initial tack with like polyesters and some of the vinyl esters out there. It's pretty darn good, and the stone's breaking within the first 3-4 days. If you retest that stuff over a year, it shears. For some reason, I'm getting a lot of shears with all of our stuff that we've tested on some of the other systems. But like I said, you get some good initial tack to it. But once you start soaking the blocks too, that's where your total strength is coming down. If the blocks are soaked when you're gluing them together. So, but yeah, I don't know. We generally get about, they're only getting anywhere from 1,700 to 2,500 with the vinyl esters and polyesters, but those drastically drop off over a year because we save a lot of the blocks, and we'll throw them outside and bring them back in and test them and stuff. So,
do you notice any performance difference between on the MMAs between quartz and natural stone? And I'm trying to figure out, we're seeing a difference and don't know why.
Quartz and natural stone? Well, quartz is a real dense material. You guys might have a better explanation too, but that's a dense material. You need interlocking. I always say for the marbles in the granites, you got great stuff going on with epoxies and urethanes. When you're working with really the compressed material, it's like putting some of the plastics, like the vinyl esters work great in that situation.
Have to know, with that engineered stone, is it a polyester based or an acrylic based? If it's a polyester based, it's going to bond really well to polyester and with polyester versus. Yeah, go ahead.
All the quartz that's made in this country and most of the world is polyester based. I only know one acrylic made MMA based quartz. So everything you see from Cambria, Caesar stone, solid stone, hand stone, Via Terra, they're all polyester based. Now, not all acrylics are created equal. Different chemistries, we say MMA chemistry, one company may have an MMA chemistry that's at a certain level, another one has a different one. But when you're bonding quartz, you're bonding to that polyester. All right, so you get a chemical bond, it etches into there, and you should see better bonding on quartz than you will any natural stone. Okay? Now, when we go to natural stones, like marbles and granites and stuff like that, there's a whole variety. But again, the particular formulator of that acrylic chemistry can add silanes in there that bond organic and inorganic products. Organic is the resin, inorganic is either the calcium or the silica that's in the stone, and we'll actually bond it. Some manufacturers will put an acid in there, very mild, weak acid that actually bonds to the stone, just like, that lime juice actually attacks it. The acid will attack it and bond with it and make it stronger. So depending on whose MMA you're using and what you're using, you'll get different effects. But by and large, every major quartz manufacturer, if they're not on cartridge glue, they're going to cartridge glue. We'll be in cartridge glue in the next 3 to 5 years. All right. and MMAs is the product of choice in that. Now, when you go to natural stones and granites, you'll see a whole variety, and there are a lot of products out there that work well. But again, you know, Akimi has a different product, K-Bond has a different product, Superior Stone has a different product, 10X has different products, and you know, Bondstone has different products. So, I mean, while in general we make that statement, it's not really fair to say that all adhesives are created equal, all MMAs are the same, all epoxies are the same, because you know there are some newer technologies out there that are kick butt. Does that kind of answer your problem, the question?
It does, and we're noticing this, but the secondary question to that question would be, are the MMAs affected by the natural stones absorbance of water and potentially binding or gluing, miters or otherwise, on material that didn't dry out as readily as a quartz?
Actually, many of the MMAs incorporate a little bit of water into the formulation to give them stability, shelf stability. So they're accustomed to bonding with wet stone. Now, there are some MMAs that can bond underwater, and we use MMAs to fix pools, for example, with the water involved in it. So generally, MMAs are going to be less susceptible to moisture in the stones that you find out there versus maybe even an epoxy. And urethanes, you would know better than me on urethanes or polyaspartics with a level of water. If you have a moist stone, will they bond?
You have to have it completely dry. You
So-
need it dry.
So there's some other areas you need to consider. But in general, MMAs, moist stones, they're fine.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're having issues, you have to talk to the manufacturer, because it could be a shelf life issue with not, you know, there's so many different systems out there. If they're not turning their, their inventory over, and if it's coming from overseas, there might be some issues, because you're already losing 3 months probably coming over from overseas. Yeah, it's sitting in a container, heated up, so you don't know. Freeze thaw, everything.
That's a good point. Great. Any other questions for Paul? Let's give Paul a round of applause.
Thank you.